So today we're going to show you the most useful small tools that we've found
for working on our steel sailboat.
I'm Taryn, this is Logan, and this is Max. Our life rarely goes as planned, and this story is no different. But we are determined to rebuild our beautiful steel boat, even stronger than she was before. And we're bringing you along with us. So in case you're new here, my name's Taryn.
And I'm Logan.
We're currently rebuilding a steel boat together. So we both have some metalwork experience for years. I've been welding and doing metalwork projects, fitting, fabricating since I was 18 years old. So I'll let you guess how old I am now and how many years that is.
My experience has been all over the map. I've worked with mechanical things and in metal for most of my life since I was a little kid. When I got mostly involved in it, I was probably about 10 years old. So, let you guess how long I've been doing it.
So anyway, my point with all of that is that we've got a decent amount of experience between the two of us in using quite a few different tools under quite a few different circumstances, and now in particular after spending over a year rebuilding this metal boat. So we're going to share with you some of the tools that we've found most useful during this process.
One of the most useful tools, regardless of any boat that you own, any boat project that you're doing, is the grinder. The angle grinder has a bunch of different attachments you can put on it. There's grinding discs, sanding discs, flapper wheels, cutting discs. There's just so many different attachments you can put on it, and you can use it on everything: steel, aluminum, fiberglass, just paint, wood. They are one of the most versatile tools that you can possibly get. And you can have corded grinders, which are good for us because we do a lot of grinding when we're doing a big project. And then cordless grinders, which are great for small things and getting into tight places where you don't want to be wrapped up in a cord. The jobs we generally use the grinder for is taking off coatings. That's a big one. Cutting material. Anything that is attached to the boat that we can't cut in a chop saw or a bandsaw or something like that, we generally cut with the grinder, with the cutting disc, taking the material down. So if we have a really bad weld,
None of those on this boat.
which never happens to us.
Never ever.
You can grind that weld back out and try again. Or if we have to remove a section of the hull and we can't plasma cut, or we want a nice straight line.
So the second thing that we love to use is this vise. A vise is just a really versatile tool for holding things in place when you're trying to cut things, or you're trying to grind them, or you're trying to do pretty much any altercation to them. And they're useful for wood, they're useful for any kind of metal. On Nordic, so the boat that we had before this boat, we actually had a vise in our little shop that was on one side of the boat, and that was really nice for, again, working on whatever. Because one of the biggest struggles when you're doing any of these jobs is being able to actually hold your piece of material still while you're trying to do whatever to it. And it's a safety hazard for it to be moving around, as well as just a pain in the butt. So these you can just mount wherever. Like this one is literally through a hole in the table, and that's it. And now I've got grease all over my fingers. Oops. So we have used this thing a lot, as you've probably seen in our videos. Everything pretty much that we've worked on has to be cleaned to some extent. You cut it, you have to clean the edge off after you cut it, so we'll stick whatever piece of metal we've cut into the vise and clean it up before putting it on the boat. Very highly recommend putting these somewhere if you have the space for them.
So this
Ooh.
fancy piece of equipment here is very highly underrated.
What is it?
Oh, it's a wire brush. Wire brush, especially one with stainless bristles, is pretty much used for tons and tons of cleanup and prep. You'll see me while I'm welding, I'll make a pass, and then if I have to make a pass over top of that or connect to the end of it, I'll take the wire brush and just clean up the weld so that as I'm going, I'm continuously cleaning it, and it's good to have a clean one. We also have a dirty one for brushing rust, basically just trying to take off any loose rust so that we can see what's underneath it. Another really helpful tool for if you have a steel boat and you don't have access to a sandblaster or something like that, and you need to prep a large area or even a small area, you've got a bit of rust coming through the paint or whatever. The Tercoo has been very helpful for that. Basically it's these rubber discs and they have a little carbide tip in them, and as they spin you just gently put it against the piece and it takes all the rust and stuff off, and it leaves the surface prepped well enough. It's almost as good as blasting. The only thing that we found with the Tercoo is you have to have a 3/8 drill, or a drill that will spin fast enough. I believe this one is 2600 RPM. Our big drill is quite a bit slower, it's half the speed. So it doesn't work with these Tercoo bits. But these spin anywhere like below 4000 RPM. So like 3600, some of the drills spin at 3600, that's perfect. And yeah, and they come in different widths. So that one's got 3. This one has 2. And that one is just a single. And we found the single is probably one of the more useful ones for getting into corners and stuff. It doesn't actually spin this way like you would think. It spins this way.
Oh yeah.
And you're not supposed to push on it. It just sits on the surface, and yeah, so it's very easy on the arms and the body.
Yeah.
So another tool we use quite a bit is a square. Different kinds, and they come in really handy even on a boat where nothing is square. But I use them mostly to get angles, like a 45, especially this little guy because it fits in lots of little tight spaces. I use them a lot as a straight edge. So for lining up panels or for making sure something's flat, like you can really see the curve of the deck and be able to judge that properly. Obviously they have all different kinds of measurements on them, so you can use them as a ruler.
So the next thing is vice grips. Now Logan doesn't really care about these, he doesn't like them as much as I do, but I find these extremely useful, especially as somebody who consistently drops things. Logan will be using like a pair of pliers or something to hold on to something, and I'll do the same, and then it's like the screw's lost. But the nice thing about vice grips is you stick it in the vise, the tiny vise at the top, and then you can just adjust it to whatever size your thing is, and then it just holds on to it, just like that. And you can do it like as tight or as loose as you want. And when you're done, just let it go. I've used these since I started doing metalwork when I was like 18 years old, and they've consistently been like the most useful thing to me. But again, that's like personal preference. Like I said, Logan could not care less about having a pair of vice grips around, but the entire time we've been working on this boat project, I've been like, where's the vice grips? Where's the vice grips? They're not very expensive either. Highly recommend getting a pair of them if you're working on pretty much anything on the boat where you're prone to dropping things in particular. These are very cold right now because there's snow around here and it's almost 0 degrees, but this is another tool that we've used a ton. So these are die grinders. This one's pneumatic, so you hook air up to the end of it, and this one's battery powered. Also, shout out to Milwaukee because their tools have held up very well, and we highly recommend Milwaukee as your brand to buy. We're not sponsored, just like to give a shout out to companies that actually produce a quality product. So these guys we've used mostly where we couldn't get the big grinder into. So lots of corners, lots of like tight spaces where we just couldn't pull the grinder in. And they do the same thing essentially as a grinder. They take off material or they sand a space so that you can get a nice smooth finish on them. You can also change the bits in these guys a lot. So like there's a wire brush that you can put in them. There's different sized dies if you want like a different texture or you've got a different surface.
And what is that called?
This is a burring bit. So there's different shapes and sizes of those that you can get. And then just like little sanding wheels, like this guy.
There you go.
And like this guy. So just different textures. This guy in particular we have used an absolute ton. This has been a lifesaver for getting paint off and trying to get the proper texture for repainting, especially on the interior of the boat. We used it literally from bow to stern. Those, especially now that you can get electric ones instead of just having to worry about like getting a pneumatic one and then having a compressor on your boat, they're super useful for cleaning up small spaces.
Another tool that I've used a ton on this project is the air hammer. So it's basically just uses like pneumatics and hammers.
It does.
This has a chisel bit in it right now, but these are quick change. So you can pull that out and you can put in different bits. So that one there is for cutting sheet metal, but I use it for cutting lots of things. And there's a pointy one. And there's a hammer one. But I use the chisel the most, as you can tell by how worn down and ugly it is. It's all rusty now from chiseling off salty rust from our boat. And the other good thing about the air hammer is it doubles. Hold on here a sec. So you can pull the chuck off of it, and instead of having a separate needle gun, this guy just threads on here, and now I have a needler.
Woot woot.
Or a needle gun. And we use that a lot for just cleaning up heavy rust, taking off paint and rust and all kinds of garbage. And when you use it, you can use it to prep the surface if you can't get any other tool in to the spot. It will clean up the steel well enough to use an industrial paint, as well as it does leave little hammer marks everywhere, and it leaves like a textured surface, I guess. It is not the easiest tool to use. It's quite heavy. Like, it is a substantial weight. It probably weighs 7 pounds altogether, and that doesn't sound like much, but when you're holding it for hours and hours on end in awkward positions, it's not light, and it vibrates very aggressively. So your hands and wrists and elbows really get beat up, and it's one of the things that you have to watch out for when using it for long periods of time, as Taryn knows from getting tendonitis from using it.
So another useful thing that we found is clamps, which is pretty obvious, but it helps to have clamps around of different shapes and sizes in order to hold your metal or whatever you're working on in place. So the C-clamp, this is a huge one. We have quite a few different sizes of C-clamps, and they've all come in handy for different reasons. Like this one's a lot deeper, so if you have wider metal, it's a lot easier to use this or that way. We've used these for so many things. We use it for the bulwark from beginning to end, pretty much. We use them for the bulwarks to hold things in place. We also used it to like pull the bulwarks in, because a lot of the time like your metal's straight, but your boat obviously is curved. They're a great fitting and fabricating tool, especially because if the metal isn't doing what you want it to do, you use these to pull them in, you tack it with the weld, and then you can take the clamp off and the metal should stay where you've tack welded it. So yeah, there's these guys, C-clamps. My favorite clamps are probably the C-clamps, but Logan's favorite are these Bessie clamps. So this can move so that you can change the length and the shape and the size and whatever when you're using it. And then it's the same concept, you just kind of tighten that on your metal. And when you tighten this, it puts pressure on this bit and holds it in place so that it doesn't slide or move on you. That's the theory anyway. A lot of the time when you're doing stuff, especially like we're doing, where things are not at a perfect angle, you end up actually having this slip off. So it's a lot of just trial and error and using different stuff to see what'll work. But these are pretty heavy duty. They can handle a lot and they're pretty versatile.
And one of the most useful tools that we could possibly have, and the funnest to use, hammer. I use a hammer for basically everything. Shaping metal, pounding stuff into place, getting frustration out. It's super useful. Ball peen is especially useful because it's got this flat face on one side and rounded on the other. So you can do a lot of different shaping. You can hit into corners with the ball, with the rounded side. And then when that doesn't cut it, you use a slightly bigger hammer.
Slightly.
And then obviously they get bigger and bigger. And yeah, hammers.
So those are the most useful tools, small tools, that we've found for working on our steel boat and getting the metalwork done.
So what do you guys think? If you feel like we've missed anything, comment on our video.
Yeah, leave us a comment. Let us know, have you used these tools? What's your favorite application for them? Or did we miss something? Is there a favorite tool that you guys use or the most useful tool that you guys think there is? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next week.